I've never played a mono-type Nuzlocke, so why not try one with the water type? I'm fairly confident in my Nuzlocke skills, having beaten a few in my free time, but I wanted to mix it up. Pokemon Platinum offers a generous amount of encounters, but I'm not going to be using any mythical or legendaries, so that leaves us with 17. In addition, this is a hardcore Nuzlocke, meaning no items in battle, no overleveling the gym leader's ace, and only one unique encounter per route. There are two major concerns I have for this run, being Gardenia and Falconer. The grass and electric type gym leader are going to be very difficult for my water types, but I do have a few strategies in mind. After being gaslit by the professor, it's time to pick up our starter, being Piplup, and immediately our rival wants to fight us. I named our rival Salt because I prefer freshwater, and all Salt wants to do is stand there and click withdraw. So eventually our Piplup is able to take it down with one final pound. After reaching Sand Gem Town, we're told we're allowed to keep our starter Piplup, who I decide to name Torpedo. Torpedo is a jolly nature, which is pretty unfortunate as it does trade special attack for speed. After a tutorial on how to catch Pokemon, we encounter our second team member, Bidoof, which I named Beach Ball. Beach Ball has the Unaware ability, and while both abilities are nice, I would have preferred Simple. We eventually make it to Jubilife, where we can fish ourselves up a Magikarp, who will eventually evolve into our strongest encounter, Gyarados, who I decided to name Noodle. Gyarados is an absolute monster of a Pokemon, and ours has a plus speed nature, which is even better. After chasing down some clowns and checking out the trainer school, we're challenged by our rival once again, who has picked up a Starly since the last time we fought him. Unfortunately for him, Torpedo makes quick work of Starly and picks up an easy KO. He then sends out his Turtwig, who still doesn't know a grass type move, and Torpedo is able to eventually knock him out after some bubbles. We encounter some dude in the cave who gives us Rock Smash before running into our next encounter, a Psyduck who I name Rubber Duck. The Psyduck line doesn't get very much love, so I'm looking forward to using it this run. However, we got literally the worst possible Psyduck with an adamant nature, which increases its physical attack for its special attack. Surely that won't be an issue, right? We run into some guy in the mines who turns out to be a gym leader. The first gym leader has rock type Pokemon, which should be pretty easy for my water types, right? After grinding up my team to the level cap, it's time to challenge Rourke. I lead Rubber Duck, who despite having an adamant nature, is still my strongest lead here. Rubber Duck wastes no time and is able to pick up the one shot onto Geodude. Rourke counters and sends out Onix, in which our Duck here is also able to take it down. Rourke sends out his ace Cranidos, who goes for a headbutt as I go for Water Gun, putting Cranidos into potion range. After the heal, it lives on a sliver. Cranidos goes for another headbutt and it freaking flinches me. I go to swap out into Torpedo and yeah, for some reason the first gym leader has a Cranidos with Pursuit. Torpedo is able to pick up the KO with Bubble, and with a heavy heart, we earn ourselves the first gym badge. I make my way back to Jubilife City and give these two grunts an ego check. As we're making our way up to Floraroma Town, we're rewarded with Prinplup, who learns Metal Claw and a Bibarel. After arriving, we pick up the TM for Pluck, which may come in handy on Gardenia's grass types. We pick up our next encounter outside the Valley Windworks, a Shellos, who I name Umbrella. After dealing with a bunch of grunts, it's time to face the first real run killer of this game, Galactic Commander Mars and her Perugly. Luckily, I've come prepared. Mars leads Zubat, which gets outsped in one shot by Bibarel. She then sends in Perugly and clicks Fake Out. I'm pretty sure I'm slower, so I go for Rock Smash, fishing for a defense drop but don't get it. We don't need it anyways though, since Beach Ball gets a critical hit, granting us the clean sweep. I waste no time heading up to Route 203, where I pick up our final encounter before Gardenia, a Buizel who I decide to name Goggles. After making my way through Eterna Forest, Noodle is finally ready to evolve into Gyarados. With this much needed buff to our team, it'll make this grass gym slightly more bearable, as Gyarados will only take neutral damage from the grass type moves. But then, disaster struck. As I was grinding my team preparing for Gardenia, I wasn't paying attention and accidentally overleveled Gyarados to level 23, meaning I won't be able to bring him to the gym. Because of this, I have to rely on probably the most scuffed strategy of all time, Headbutt Flinches. It's finally time to take on Gardenia. I lead Beach Ball to take out Turtwig, however we get extremely lucky with a Headbutt Flinch. I was planning on sacking this to Cherim, but this will allow it to get in an extra hit. With this, Bibarel is able to level up to level 23. After checking my calcs, I learned that Hyper Fang will get us the 2-hit KO while Headbutt doesn't, so I decided to teach it. Normally, I hate relying on moves that aren't 100% accurate, but in this case, I think it's worth it. Beach Ball goes for Hyper Fang and gets another freaking flinch, allowing us to stay at full health as Gardenia sends in her ace. Gardenia goes for Stun Spore and misses, allowing us to get a Hyper Fang off for free. She goes for Grass Knot, leaving Bibarel on 14 HP as Beach Ball finishes off Roserade with another Hyper Fang, granting us an insane sweep on Gardenia. I don't know what the odds are of double flinching plus Hyper Fang not missing plus Stun Spore miss, but Bibarel along with this run is very lucky to be alive after such a big mistake. There's no time to waste though as we make our way over to our next challenge, the Team Galactic Commander Jupiter. We're much more prepared for this fight, and all you really need to know is that Dragon Rage is a completely balanced move on Gyarados. It does feel really nice to actually be able to use our Gyarados though after training it so much. After saving the old man, we're rewarded with a bicycle and some blonde lady tries to give us an egg. We make our way down Cycling Road over to Hardhome City where we find the ghost type gym leader Fantina. Before challenging her, I break into Bebe's house and steal an Eevee. Eevee will eventually evolve into Vaporeon, but for now its normal type will be pretty useful in Fantina's gym. I name him Flippers and he has probably the best possible nature, being modest. I make sure to do a bit of training before confronting Fantina and our hard work pays off. At level 26, our Weasel evolves into Floatzel, learning Crunch, an insanely useful move for the ghost type gym. Fantina leads Duskull, who gets one shot by Crunch. Unfortunately, she sends out Miss Magius next, and we're forced to swap out after one Crunch. I go into Gyarados, who takes down a Shadow Ball and is able to take down her ace with a Dragon Rage. Lastly is Haunter, who after some pivoting and the help of some Confusion RNG, goes down to a Bubble Beam from Torpedo. Our rival wants to fight us after taking down Fantina, and he tries to set up with a double team, but luckily Torpedo is able to hit through with Bubble Beam twice, picking up the KO. Our rival sends out Groudle, who unfortunately now does know a grass type move. I swap into Gyarados, but Groudle just clicks Withdraw, so I take it down with just 2 Dragon Rages. Salt counters with his newly added Weasel, who tickles Noodle and also falls to 2 Dragon Rages. He then sends out another newly added Pokemon, being Ponyta, who falls to, yep, you guessed it, another 2 Dragon Rages. After obtaining the Good Rod, it's time to do some backtracking and get some encounters. I firstly grab a Goldeen on Route 209, who I name Seashell, and she has an adamant nature, which is actually really nice. As I'm backtracking, I make sure to grab the TM for Earthquake, as my plan for Maylene does require this. After making it back to Eterna City, I fish up a Barboach, who I name Cooler. Lastly, I nab a Finneon on Route 219, who I name Pearl. I feel like Lumineon and Seeking are often overlooked, so I'm going to add both of them to the team and see if they're as bad as everyone really says they are. Upon arriving in Salacion Town, we head straight to the ruins and grab the Water Stone. I'm not going to evolve our Eevee yet though, as I'm pretty happy with our current party. As we approach Veilstone City, I realize I've made a major mistake. I encounter a Meryl who I forgot was even an encounter on this route, and I realize I've only got one singular Pokeball. I decide to hit it with a Dragon Rage as it can never crit or ever kill this thing, and I toss my singular Pokeball. We got it. Not sure if I'll ever use this thing though, as it does have thick fat over huge power, but I'll take it. I do some much needed training, evolving our Barboach into Wishcash and Finneon into Lumineon. I also make sure to teach Earthquake to our Gyarados, as with this TM, it is actually able to one-shot Maylene's Lucario. And with that, it's time for the gym. She leads Meditite and I lead Torpedo. I know she's clicking Fake Out turn 1, so the following turn I use Pluck, as Rock Tomb slows me down. Unfortunately for us, Meditite clicks Drain Punch, healing it out of Pluck range, but Torpedo does not care and gets the clutch critical hit. Maylene then sends in her ace Lucario as I swap into Gyarados with Intimidate. After taking 2 Force Palms and getting paralyzed, we hit through the paralysis and pick up the KO onto Lucario. She then sends in Machoke, and I stay in, not wanting it to click Bulk Up. It goes for Focus Energy as I hit an Earthquake. I then get crit by a Karate Chop, which still did almost no damage, and one final Earthquake brings down Machoke, earning us the 4th gym badge. I head south to Pastoria City, and upon arriving, my rival tells me that Crasher Wake is still in Veilstone City. After some painful backtracking, I realize I missed a double battle against 2 grunts with Dawn, and based on their levels, I can assume that this was probably meant to be done a while ago. I then make my way back down to Pastoria City for the 2nd time, in which I head to the Safari Zone and pick up our newest team member, Wooper, who I decide to name Scuba. I then get a surprise rival battle, which I was extremely unprepared for. So unprepared in fact that I'm not even healed going into this. It is not looking good. Salt leads Staravia, and I lead with a damaged Goggles. I click Crunch and get a lucky defense drop as Staravia sets up a double team. I click Crunch again, leaving Staravia with a Sliver before finishing it off with an Aqua Jet. He then sends in his scariest Pokemon, Groudle, as I swap into Noodle. Of course, Razor Leaf gets a critical hit, taking me down to half HP. Ice Fang is my only super effective move here, so I have to stay in and click Ice Fang despite risking the crit. I get the freaking 5% miss on Ice Fang as I take another Razor Leaf, leaving me in the yellow. At this point, I assume I may end up losing the run here, so I have to place for Ice Fang Flinch or Freeze. I click Ice Fang and it doesn't even do half, but for some reason, Groudle wants to go for Withdraw. This gives us another chance to potentially get a Freeze or a crit, and unlucky. But somehow, some way, Gyarados is an absolute beast and survives on literally 1 HP. Unreal. We go for one last Ice Fang and finally take down the Grottle. He sends in Ponyta and I swap to Pearl. I click Water Pulse, taking Ponyta to yellow, and one final Water Pulse takes her down. Salted in his final Pokemon Weasel, who Pearl can still deal with after some Water Pulses. It's quite evident that I've got some training to do, so I backtrack to the trainers I skipped on the way down here and level up my team to level 37. With this, we obtain Goldeen, a Quagsire who learns Earthquake, and our starter can finally evolve into its final form, Empoleon. Crasher Wake is also a water type enthusiast, however I don't think he'll give us as much trouble as our rival did. Wake leads Gyarados, and so do I, but whose is better? The answer is honestly neither. After like 20 Ice Fangs, I finally get him low, and then he uses a Hyper Potion. He then gets a critical hit Waterfall, leaving Noodle on 7 HP. I really need to be more careful with this Pokemon before something bad happens. I then swap to Pearl and slowly finish it off with Water Pulses. He counters with Floatzel, and I pivot to Torpedo on the Crunch. Having a Steel type now is just so useful. We trade Crunches and Brines, and I finally am able to take it down. He then sends in his final Pokemon Quagsire, and I decide that it should be another mirror match. I click Earthquake and get a massive critical hit as he counters with a Yawn. I go for another Earthquake as Wake uses a Hyper Potion. Scuba falls asleep and I swap to Goggles. We then get hit with a Water Pulse, which thankfully did not confuse, and 2 Crunches plus an Aqua Jet is enough to earn us our 5th Gym Badge. Team Galactic is doing some stuff, and I'm tasked with chasing down a Grunt. Before that, I pick up a Remoraid in the city who I name Sunday. I cure some ducks and head up to Celestic Town where Cyrus wants to challenge us. Cyrus's team isn't particularly difficult currently, but his future teams are going to be much more of a challenge. I do some backtracking after I get Surf and pick up a Tentacool on Route 220 who I name Snorkel, and a Wingull on Route 213 who I name Surfboard. I add Tentacool to the team, replacing Lumineon as unfortunately it just isn't cutting it anymore. I make sure to do a bit of training as I know there's a scary rival battle on the bridge in Canalave City. During this time, Snorkel evolves into a Tentacruel. Salt leads with his newly evolved Staraptor, and I lead Snorkel to set up Toxic Spikes. He attempts to set up double teams, but thankfully we get through with a Poison Jab and get the poison. Also, I didn't realize how strong this thing actually was, and I now realize that I was actually dead to a crit from Takedown. I swap into Empoleon to resist the takedown as an Aqua Jet finishes off Staraptor. Salt counters with Heracross who wants to Brick Break, so I swap into Noodle for an Intimidate. I go for Aqua Tail and surprisingly am able to pick up the one-shot. Gyarados is just such a strong Pokemon and never fails to impress me. He sends in Rapidash and I'm able to just outspeed and click Aqua Tail again for another clean one-shot. He sends in his Torterra, who is actually less scary now that it has a 4x weakness to Ice. I go for an Ice Fang and pick up another KO. It's kind of weird to think that Grottle is more threatening to my Gyarados than a Torterra. Salt's last Pokemon is a Floatzel, who falls to a single Earthquake into Aqua Jet combo. I head to Iron Island and pick up the Strength Team and ditch Riley. Sorry. There's no time to waste though, as it's time for the next gym leader, Byron. I add Wish Cash to the team in place of Seeking temporarily to help deal with Magneton. We get an above average magnitude roll and pick up the KO. He sends out Steelix, in which I stay in and click Surf, leaving it with a Sliver. After a full restore, a high roll Surf is able to take down Steelix. Byron's final Pokemon is a Bastiodon who just wants to spam Iron Defense, so I swap to Torpedo and take it out with 2 Surfs, earning us a very clean 6th gym badge. There's no breaks from fighting as we learn that Team Galactic is causing even more problems, so we head to some lake. Before we arrive, I add Pelipper to the team as I could really use a team member that can learn Fly. But now it's time to challenge Galactic Commander Saturn. Saturn leads Golbat and I lead Torpedo. I click Flash Cannon but unfortunately get flinched by Bite. Golbat tries some confusion flinch strategies, but eventually we're able to take it down. Next up is Toxicroak. He goes for Mud Bomb and misses, so I go for Pluck to heal up with its Citrus Berry. Despite this, after clicking Surf, Toxicroak goes for a Revenge, which normally wouldn't be an issue, but of course he gets a critical hit. Farewell, my friend. Empoleon was an absolute beast and would 100% have been on the Elite Four team. With this loss, this run just got a whole lot harder. Floatzel was able to finish off the rest of his team, but losing our starter really hurts. I grab Eevee out of the box and evolve it into Vaporeon as a replacement. Unfortunately, there's no time to grieve as we make our way to the next lake, challenging Commander Mars once again. Mars leads Golbat and I lead Flippers. Golbat goes for Toxic as I use Aurora Beam, taking Golbat down to yellow. After tanking an Air Cutter, it falls to a second Aurora Beam from Vaporeon. Next up is Bronzor and I click Surf and tank an extra Sensory. I go for one last Surf to take down Bronzor as Mars sends in her Ace. I know it's time to swap out, so I swap in Pelipper on the Fake Out. Purugly then goes for Slash as I click Surf for some chip. A second Surf leaves Purugly on a Sliver as she heals up thanks to her Citrus Berry. I swap into Tentacruel on a Hypnosis and tank 2 slashes. I'm at 66 health, so I assume I'm safe even from a crit. But yeah, Of course, we would get back-to-back crit by the commander's aces. After checking the calcs, it looks like there was one singular killing roll, meaning it was about a 1 in 256 chance for us to lose Tentacruel here. I was planning on using our Tentacruel as a counter to Abomasnow, but now that we've lost it, I have to risk multiple crits on this upcoming fight, and without Toxic Spikes, I'm risking a lot of misses on Frostlass. With a broken team, we hold our breath as we challenge Candace. She leads Sneasel as I lead Gyarados. At level 44, we learned the ever so powerful move Dragon Dance, which is probably the only reason we even stand a chance in this gym. I set up 3 Dragon Dances and thankfully dodge crits from all 3 feint attacks. We finish off Sneasel with an Earthquake before Piloswine comes out. Thankfully, we hit the 90% accurate Aqua Tail, taking it down in a single hit. Next up is Abomasnow, which is arguably scarier than Frostlass. I click Aqua Tail to get it down to a 3rd and thankfully dodge a crit on the Wood Hammer, living on 1 HP after the hail. I swap into Pelipper on the heal turn and click Fly. We do about 40% and take an Avalanche. I was really hoping it would click Wood Hammer here, as after the recoil damage we would be able to take it out with Fly. With 0 Pokemon that can take a Wood Hammer, I'm forced to stay in and pray for a crit. We unfortunately don't get it and Pelipper falls to a Wood Hammer. We send in Goggles to pick up the kill with an Aqua Jet, which brings out her ace. Frostlass goes for a double team as I click Crunch, hoping to connect, and thankfully we do. I take a Shadow Ball and go for Crunch, leaving Frostlass on a sliver thanks to her Citrus Berry. I pivot to Vaporeon as it's incredibly bulky and eats a Shadow Ball. Frostlass goes for a second Shadow Ball and of course gets a critical hit, but luckily Flippers connects with a bite, earning us a very sloppy 7th gym badge. We make an unnecessarily long journey to the top of Mount Coronet, where we're tasked with teaming up with our rival in a double battle. I won't bore you with the details though, as this battle wasn't really too difficult. I think there's some sort of plot in the story going on here, but oh well. We're sucked into the Distortion World, where Cynthia forces us to fight Cyrus. I lead Flippers as Cyrus leads Houndoom. For some reason it knows Thunderfang, but we're just so bulky that it doesn't matter, and it goes down after a Surf. I swap into Gyarados on the Mirror matchup and set up 2 Dragon Dances, which will allow me to sweep through the remainder of his team. Gyarados is just so good. We're then tasked with defeating the legendary Pokemon Giratina, which just goes down to 3 Ice Fangs from our girl Noodle. We finally arrive in Sunny Shore City, but before challenging the gym, I pick up a Mantike who I named Fate, as the run really depends on this thing. I saved our Remoraid from before, as it is required to evolve Mantike into Mantine. I then also evolve our Remoraid into Octillery. Before challenging the gym, I make sure to add some of our water ground types to the team here, as they'll be extremely useful into this electric type gym. Volkner leads Jolteon and I lead Cooler. I take an Iron Tail and use Earthquake, leaving it with a Sliver. After a Full Restore, we get a High Roll and take it out with a second Earthquake. Next up is Raichu, who misses a Focus Blast and goes down to a singular EQ. He then sends out his Ace, which tickles us with Quick Attack as we chunk it with an Earthquake. He goes for a second Quick Attack before falling to yet another Earthquake. Lastly is Luxray, who goes for Crunch and takes big damage from an EQ. Fortunately, we cannot get the full sweep with Whiscash, so I swap into Umbrella to finish it off with a Mud Bomb. I know at the beginning I said I was worried about Volkner, but having access to 3 water ground types makes this gym so much easier than I originally thought. There's one last rival fight before the Elite Four, but I skipped over it as we are a bit over leveled compared to his level 40s. I nervously approach the Elite Four, and once inside, I realize I've made a massive mistake. My level cap here is 59, but for some reason I thought it was 56, so now we're going to be 3 levels down compared to the Elite Four's ace Pokemon. Here's a quick look at the team that I think has the best chance of going all the way to Cynthia. I walk into the first room and challenge the bug type specialist Aaron. Aaron leads Yen Mega as I lead Sunday. According to my calcs, a single Ice Beam should be enough for the one shot, and it is. He then sends in Heracross and clicks Close Combat, which thankfully does not crit as I fire off a Psybeam. Heracross lives on a 3rd as I swap into Gyarados for an Intimidate. Unfortunately, it goes for Stone Edge here, but a Waterfall is enough to pick up the KO. Next up is Vespiquen, and I go for a Dragon Dance as it clicks Defend Order. I taught Gyarados Avalanche here, but I didn't realize that it always goes second. Regardless, we're able to take down the Vespiquen. Thanks to the Dragon Dance, we're able to outspeed and one-shot Drapion with an Earthquake. I swap into Scuba as Scissor goes for Night Slash into X Scissor. I decide to stay in and go for the attack, but yeah, of course it gets a crit. After looking at my team, I swap into Goggles and go for an Aqua Jet for some chip damage, and wow, back-to-back critical hits. We're now down 2 Pokemon before even defeating the first member of the Elite Four. I'm starting to have some serious doubts. Next, it's time for Bertha, the ground type specialist. She leads Whiscash as I lead Mantine. Luckily, these Pokemon are much easier to deal with for my water type team. I try my luck with a Confuse Ray before trading water type moves with Zen Headbutts. Eventually, it falls to a Surf from Fate. She counters with Golem, who falls to a single Surf thanks to the old Sturdy. She then sends in Rhyperior, who falls to the same fate. Get it? Because my Pokemon's name is Fate. and like we just killed it with Surf. Do you get it? Do you do you get it? Next up is Gliscor, and I swap in Flippers on an Ice Fang. I then take an Earthquake and fire off an Aurora Beam, picking up the KO. Lastly is Hippowdon, who thanks to Vaporeon's modest nature, falls to a single Surf. This fight was so much easier than Aaron. The third member, Flint, specializes in Fire-type Pokemon, yet another great matchup for our Water types. I lead Gyarados on the Houndoom and set up 2 Dragon Dances. I could have gone for a third here, but it's unnecessary and would be risking crit. And almost every death this run has been caused by a crit. With these 2 Dragon Dances though, we're able to outspeed and one-shot Infernape in Magmortar, but unfortunately, Magmortar gets the freaking Flame Body proc, stopping our sweep. I swap into Fate on the Overheat and take down the Flareon after a Hydro Pump Surf combo. Lastly is Rapidash, and I swap into Flippers on the bounce turn. It gets the Paralyze because of course it does, but thankfully we hit through, taking it down with a single Surf. 3 down, 1 to go. The previous 2 Elite Four members haven't caused us too much trouble. But without our Floatzel to deal with Lucian's Psychic types, we've got to dodge a lot of crits and get pretty lucky in this fight. I make sure to use the 4 rare candies I've saved during this run on our Gyarados here in order to outspeed the Mr. Mime. According to my rule set, this is legal as the level cap only applies before challenging the first member of the Elite Four. Plus, if I had realized the level cap was 59 and not 56, my Gyarados would likely be around this level anyways. Lucian leads Mr. Mime, who gets outsped in one shot by Noodle. He then sends in Gallade, who gets flinched by a waterfall, but has the steadfast ability allowing it to now outspeed Gyarados. If Gallade gets a crit Stone Edge, this run is likely over. To my surprise, we catch a very lucky break and Gallade misses its Stone Edge before falling to a final waterfall. This was insanely lucky. Next up is Espeon. We tank a Psychic here before hitting her with a waterfall. Based on the HP, I know he's likely going to heal here, so I take the opportunity to set up a Dragon Dance. Thanks to this, we are now faster and are able to one-shot his Espeon. Bronzong comes out and I go for Waterfall, getting another lucky flinch. Lucian heals as I fire off another Waterfall before setting up a second Dragon Dance. I do this in order to ensure we outspeed his Alakazam. Unluckily, Bronzong gets a critical hit Psychic, but it ultimately makes no difference as it falls to another Waterfall. Thanks to our prep, Lucian's Ace is a joke and gets outsped and one-shot by our girl Noodle, earning us a very lucky win against the final member of the Elite Four. With the Elite Four down, only one obstacle remains: the champion of Sinnoh, Cynthia. Before this fight, I run some calcs. I need to set up at least 3 Dragon Dances with Noodle in order to even have a chance at beating Cynthia here, meaning Spiritomb needs to not get a single crit or special defense drop from Shadow Ball. Cynthia leads Spiritomb and I lead Noodle. I set up Dragon Dances as I tank Dark Pulses. Dark Pulse is the optimal move here as it cannot drop my special defense. I've also equipped Noodle here with a Mago Berry. I've done this in order to heal it out of range from an extreme speed from Lucario. Now that we're +3, we're able to take down Spiritomb with a waterfall. Next up is Togekiss, who gets outsped in one shot by a waterfall. So far, so good. Next up is Lucario, who potentially can cause us a problem. There are some killing rolls with extreme speed crit, but thankfully he doesn't click it and goes down to a waterfall. Garchomp comes out and I click waterfall, getting the one shot. Somehow this thing actually lived. Now, this is 100% on me, as if I wasn't stupid and taught Avalanche over Ice Fang, this thing would have 100% died to a +3 quad effective Ice type move. But despite the odds, Noodle refuses to die in this run. No matter how risky I play, this thing has lived on 1 HP in multiple fights, gotten an insane amount of flinches, and never fails to clutch up. She dodges the Dragon Rush, taking down Cynthia's ace with one final waterfall. Cynthia sends in my Milotic, which I know I can't take down in one hit. So I decide to go for Waterfall, fully intending on sacrificing it to get the clean switch into Vaporeon. But no, Noodle does it again. We get another freaking flinch, allowing Noodle to take down my Milotic. This is the most insane champion fight I've ever had. Lastly is Roserade, who, despite her grass typing, stands no chance against a +3 stab boosted Waterfall. We did it. This run actually went all the way, against all odds. Despite losing our starter, I thought this run might not make it. Crit after crit, our team members dropped. Psyduck, Empoleon, Tentacruel, Pelipper, Quagsire, and Floatzel. This win was for them. As I walk into the champions room and register my team, I take a look back at how far I've come. This run was possible thanks to one Pokemon in particular, Noodle the Gyarados. A small little Magikarp met at a measly level 7, putting the run on its back and single-handedly sweeping through the champions team. This was my very first ever mono-type Nuzlocke, and I'm very proud to say that I completed it on my very first try. I'm planning on doing either a grass or fire type Nuzlocke next, as those seem like the next step in my mono-type adventure. And maybe we'll even travel to the Unova region. If you enjoyed this video and want me to attempt another mono-type Nuzlocke, definitely let me know down in the comments below. Also, Noodle says you should leave a like.